What if the biggest battle, shaping the future of poor and developing countries, isn't being fought with soldiers, but with spreadsheets? What if the real war isn't loud, explosive, or obvious, but quiet, slow, and buried inside loan agreements that almost nobody reads? For decades, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, was the only game in town. If your country ran out of money, you went to the IMF. No alternatives, no backup plan. But then something changed. A new lender showed up, one that didn't lecture, didn't demand austerity on day one, didn't ask uncomfortable political questions. China. Today, developing nations are caught in a silent tug-of-war between two giants. One built on Western financial rules, the other on strategic patience and long-term leverage. And here's the twist most people miss. This isn't about generosity, it's about power. So the real mystery is this: who actually helps developing nations, and who ends up owning them? To answer that, we have to rewind, way back. Let's go back to 1944. World War II isn't even over yet. But the Allies already know one thing. The last global depression didn't start with bombs. It started with broken money systems. So in a small town called Bretton Woods, the US and its allies build a new financial order. Out of that meeting come two institutions: the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The IMF's mission sounds simple: prevent financial collapse, stabilize currencies, and help countries in crisis. At first, the IMF is basically a firefighter. If a country can't pay its bills or its currency collapses, the IMF shows up with emergency cash. But here's the catch, and this matters later. IMF money always comes with conditions. These conditions are called structural adjustments. And they usually mean cut government spending, remove subsidies, raise taxes, privatize state assets. Open markets to foreign investors. In theory, this is supposed to fix broken economies. In reality, it often causes pain first, and recovery later, if recovery comes at all. Now fast forward to the 1980s and 1990s. Latin America, Africa, South Asia. Country after country falls into debt crises. And guess who becomes a permanent resident? The IMF. This is when the criticism starts, because many countries notice a pattern. They take IMF loans, gives economies shrink, gives debt gets bigger, gives they need another IMF loan. That's when the phrase debt trap enters the conversation. But for decades, countries have no alternative. Until China enters the chat. China in the 1980s isn't a global lender. It's poor, it's inward-looking. It's still recovering from decades of internal chaos. But something massive happens after 2001. China joins the World Trade Organization, WTO, exports explode, factories multiply, foreign currency reserves pile up. By the 2010s, China is sitting on trillions of dollars. And now, Beijing faces a new problem. What do you do with that much money? The West recycles money through Wall Street and the IMF. China chooses a different path. Instead of lending through global institutions, China starts lending directly to countries. No IMF middleman, a Western oversight. Just government to government deals. Then in 2013, President Xi Jinping announces something that changes everything. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Officially, it's about infrastructure. Roads, ports, railways, power plants. Unofficially, it's about influence. China starts offering loans to developing nations that desperately need infrastructure, and fast. And here's why countries say yes. No public austerity demands, no democracy lectures, no IMF-style press conferences. It feels easier, cleaner. But this is where the story gets complicated. Let's be real. Developing nations don't hate the IMF because they're lazy. They hate it because IMF programs often hurt politically. Imagine being a leader and telling your people, fuel subsidies are gone, food prices are going up, government jobs are being cut. That's how you lose elections, or worse. China offers a different deal. China says, we'll build your port. You pay us back later. No protests on day one. Riots over fuel prices. For leaders under pressure, this is a no-brainer. Between 2008 and 2020, China becomes the largest bilateral lender to developing nations. Chinese loans rival, and in some regions exceed, IMF lending countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Zambia, Kenya, Laos all take massive Chinese loans. At first, things look good. New highways, shiny airports, power plants online, but then comes the part no one advertises: servicing. Infrastructure takes years to generate revenue. Loans demand payments now. As global interest rates rise and currencies weaken, many countries hit a wall. Sri Lanka collapses in 2022. Zambia defaults. Pakistan scrambles to avoid default. Kenya's debt costs explode. Here's where the IMF and China collide head-on. When countries run out of money, they still go back to the IMF. But now the IMF asks a new question. What do you owe China? Problem is, Chinese loan contracts are often secret. They include confidentiality clauses, asset-backed guarantees, priority repayment terms. The IMF hates this. Why? Because IMF bailouts depend on debt restructuring, everyone taking a haircut. China often refuses. From Beijing's view, why should we lose money for someone else's bad management? From the IMF's view, why should we rescue countries while China gets paid first? This is the silent battle. The countries get stuck in the middle. No IMF bailout without debt transparency. No Chinese flexibility without leverage. Everything freezes. Fallout: who pays the price? Spoiler alert, it's not the IMF, it's not China, it's ordinary people. And debt talks stall. Inflation explodes, currencies crash. Food imports shrink, fuel shortages hit governments slash spending anyway, just without IMF support. Ironically, the pain countries tried to avoid by choosing China comes back even harder. And here's the darkest part. Some Chinese loans are backed by strategic assets. Ports, mineral rights, long-term leases, the most famous example, Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. Leased to China for 99 years after debt failure, China says. This isn't colonialism, it's business. Critics say, that's a soft takeover. The truth? It's complicated, but the power imbalance is real. So why doesn't the world just fix this? Because incentives don't line up. The IMF wants transparency, shared losses, Western-style reforms. China wants full repayment, strategic positioning. No precedent for debt forgiveness. Borrowing countries want relief now, no political suicide. Room to breathe. Every negotiation becomes a three-way deadlock. Even new frameworks like the G20 Common Framework stall for years. Meanwhile, debt piles grow. History repeats. This isn't new. In the 1970s, Western banks flooded Latin America with cheap loans. Rates rose, defaults followed. IMF stepped in, different lender, same pattern. Today, China plays the role Western banks once played. IMF plays firefighter again. Developing nations relive the cycle. Shocking data point. Over 60% of low-income countries are now at high risk of debt distress. Different decade, same movie. The real question, IMF vs. China, or something else? Here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't IMF versus China. It's systems versus sovereignty. The IMF enforces discipline brutally, sometimes unfairly. China offers flexibility until leverage kicks in. Neither model is designed primarily for the long-term freedom of poor nations. Both are built around power. 3 clear takeaways. Takeaway number 1. There is no free money, only delayed consequences. Takeaway number 2. Avoiding IMF pain doesn't eliminate pain, it postpones it. Takeaway number 3. Debt becomes dangerous when transparency disappears. The next global debt crisis isn't coming. It's already here. The only question left is, will developing nations rewrite the rules or keep choosing between two imperfect masters? If you want more deep dives like this, where money, power, and history collide, subscribe. Because the loudest battles aren't always the most important ones. Sometimes, the quiet ones decide everything.